What we have done and what we have been focused on for the last couple of years has been, firstly, I'm very mindful of the fact that we are going through quite a recession. For example, the job market in Singapore has absolutely crashed. It has done the same in Australia. US is faring no better. There's an impact everywhere. The kind of approach you take to wealth is a little bit more conservative. Most people would kind of look at it that way. And this will be the case with a lot of people. Your home is your greatest asset, right? And we have been in the process of building a house. The project itself, that's taken us 5 years all up. You know, it's your home, it's very close to your heart, but it's also an asset at the same time, and you can't discount that. The second thing, what came out of COVID was amazing opportunity to grow, to increase the capability that I was able to offer as part of my own consultancy. And I'm continuing down that track right now. Thirdly, it is a look at where else to invest. You do want to diversify. You do want to not put all your eggs in one basket.
Mm-hmm. We do 3 a week.
Wow.
Yeah. So
very cool. Very cool. How's the experience been?
Good. Good. It's like I say, it's outside of my norm, so I feel like we've just got better with each one that we do.
Yeah, that's what we do.
And I have to say, like, the knowledge that I've learned from the conversations with people is phenomenal. And also you are who you hang with, right? And so I can see my mind shift changing on things, which has been really cool, actually. And even my husband commented on it. He's like, you seem a bit more open around this kind of thing. And I'm like, wow, from 15 hours of podcasting. So it's been
good stuff.
Really, I've learned a lot.
Good stuff.
So yeah. Thanks, Charlie.
Awesome. Well, no, thank you, because I needed someone that could actually execute on asking good questions and had probably a better vibe than me. So individually, so I thought Helena would make a great addition, and I kind of
meet you, Helena.
had a good had an idea of, like, we spend so much time in this room specifically, and we thought it'd be great to have conversations with people about what wealth meant to them.
Yeah.
And, just kind of the operational side of how do you obtain wealth. And I thought specifically with you, you're someone that is very diverse in how you think about wealth. And your approach to building your wealth over the last kind of probably 20 years has been one that I think is obtainable and actionable, specifically around your consulting. Because that is really my view, and it would be great to get your opinion, but this is me kind of making some assumptions, is I believe that's been a bit of a cornerstone of how you've been able to kind of make moves. But it'd be great to get, a bit of a kind of what are you focused on at the moment specifically? And I know that there's a few things going on, so it'd be really interesting to see, just a point in time kind of check of, like, what are you focused on, and then hopefully we can come to a point where we work out what wealth means to you ultimately.
Sure. So if I sort of look at what I'm focused on right now, there's a few things. Firstly, I'm very mindful of the fact that we are going through quite a recession. And the recession is not just here. If you look overseas, you find it is very similar in other markets as well. You find, for example, the job market in Singapore has absolutely crashed. It has done the same in Australia. US is faring no better. There's a lot of layoffs, especially in the tech sector, which I'm a part of and quite familiar with. So we are finding that there's an impact everywhere. In that scenario, obviously the kind of approach you take to wealth is a little bit more conservative. Most people would kind of look at it that way. What we have sort of done and what we have been focused on for the last couple of years has been, firstly, and this will be the case with a lot of people, your home is your greatest asset, right? And we have been in the process of building a house, which has taken a good 2 years of build time. If we take about the project itself, that's taken us 5 years all up.
Wow.
But it's been I guess it's a place where you live. It's your home. It's very close to your heart, but it's also an asset at the same time, and you can't discount that in any calculations that you do. So that's one of the things we have been focused on. The second thing, especially in the field that I am, what came out of COVID was an amazing opportunity to grow, to increase the capability that I was able to offer as part of my own consultancy to the various businesses. And I've taken that up and made the most of it. I've had the chance to work on some really cool stuff, really significant cool stuff. And I'm continuing down that track right now. And then thirdly, it is a look at where else to invest. So I've been, doing some research on that in terms of where should, you do want to diversify. You do want to not put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. So I'm kind of I've spent the last 6 months researching what would be a good market to target, where you could put money in and expect returns over the next few years. I've also kind of gotten to the point where I'm starting to think about a little bit more about long term.
Yeah.
Retirement and stuff is still far away, but it is not so far away that you can take it for granted.
Yeah.
And that kind of comes into play as well in terms of what is your investment horizon, where you're looking at returns coming to you in case of blah, 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 blah. So I've sort of focused on that a little bit as well.
Are there any markets in particular that you find intriguing?
This won't be a good fit for everybody because you need to, it's hard, right? Exploring other markets and approaching them and getting into them can be quite daunting or require a significant amount of compliance and paperwork to go through before you can get in there. I'm looking at India as a market, which is notorious for paperwork and compliance. But if you think about what has happened over the last 10 years in terms of the growth of the economy, the startup culture, the growth of established industry, the robustness of the compliance side of things and the security side of things there. That to me is a reasonable path to take, potentially. That's what I've kind of found. There are reasonably safe investments there that can give you between 10 to 13% return.
Are they public or private? Private.
Private.
Yeah.
Private. But these are bonds and debentures and that kind of stuff. Which
interesting.
And there's a very strong governance around those. And they give you a pretty decent return, and that's something that I'm starting to look into.
Do you become exposed to their currency when you do that, though?
Yes, you do, of course. But again, if you look at it from a currency perspective, there's been less than a 10 to 20% change in the last 20 years in terms of currency.
Against New Zealand dollar?
Against New Zealand dollar. So...
And it's actually quite nice to have exposure to another currency, specifically when you consider how, I would say, unproductive New Zealand is as a whole.
Correct. And if you look at the New Zealand dollar, it would take a miracle at this stage. I mean, things can happen. If you've got like 8 to 10 years of good governance, your dollar can be extremely strong again. But right now, looking at the horizon that we've got, I don't see New Zealand dollar being any stronger than what it is. It might go up by 5%, 10%, 15%, but it'll eventually even out, right? It's in the market. It's kind of found its place. I don't see the New Zealand dollar versus Indian rupee fluctuating that much.
It's quite cool to have a different perspective on like different markets. My view on markets at the moment is that there is a lot of concentration risk in the indexes in the US,
Yes.
which has provided an opportunity for people exposed to that. But then conversely, it provides a huge concentration risk,
Yeah.
which markets like India and other emerging markets become more appealing if you're looking at kind of a growth story that may be more fundamental based rather than momentum based. But it all kind of comes back to the US.
It does.
Like a nice way to get exposure to India is probably through an Indian ETF that's listed in the US. It's probably an easy way to kind of look at that market. A lot of really smart investors that I kind of listen to and read their content, they like emerging markets, and a lot of people are pretty hot on India right now, specifically.
There's a lot of money that's flowing in there, and that just gives you that additional, I guess, confidence in a market that globally is quite negative right now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's interesting that their options market is a atomic bomb waiting to go off, I would say. They have a lot of retail activity in India as well. We accidentally ran some ads and targeted them at India. Accidentally. Well, actually, I think it was the Facebook algorithm that knew that the best engagement would come from India, and it automatically targeted India.
Yeah.
But man, the cost of acquisition was so low, and the engagement was incredibly high. The willingness for retail in India to actually own assets and kind of allocate capital is kind of pretty active.
I mean, I wouldn't. The way that I've kind of looked at it is, all right. So if you look at the population by itself, it's about 1.4 billion now. That's a ton of people, and are a majority of them in what you would consider middle class right now? No, they're not. But are there opportunities being created for them to get to middle class? Somewhat. There are still some points of weakness. For example, the unemployment rate is still pretty high, and so on and so forth. But there is a recognition of these things, and slowly there is money going in that is likely to create work, that is likely to create opportunity, that's likely to create jobs, and that's likely to create let's say, a positive feedback loop. More jobs, more money to spend, more activity, and there's a long way to go, right? It's still a fairly, if you look at it from a per capita perspective, it's still a very low income country, but there is the capability there. There is enough capability there to say, yeah, okay, it's one of the places that you would invest in as part of your strategy.
Yeah, to become as anti-fragile as you can.
Yeah.
Having allocation to different markets can be quite nice. It's interesting though, because you're basically saying, hey, and it's quite technical, but I'll try and keep it simple, which would be you're basically going and saying, oh, this economy is having a middle class which is being extracted from and kind of struggling. And then you have this other economy where there is a growing middle class, and the trade is long the economy with a middle class that's actually able to grow and thrive, and very similar, I guess, to the China story with how many people they've taken out of poverty over the last 30 years. And then a middle class that is obviously being squeezed. It's kind of an interesting concept, for sure. And obviously the birth rate there is better. They've got natural growth of the population rather than having to import it.
Indeed. And that's actually really true. The other side of that is that the average age is lower than you've got in a lot of other rather developed economies.
Western.
Right? So that dividend's got to come. And it's got to come in the next 10 to 15 years, 10 to 20 years. If you look at what happened with China, all right? So China, when they opened up, they didn't actually see growth in their markets, like exponential growth in their markets from there. They saw it about 30 years after they opened up. In those 30 years, they looked at the infrastructure that was required, the energy that was required, and all of those problems got solved. And then you started to see a real growth in China. India opened up in around 93, 94, 95. So we are hitting that 30-year mark about now.
The inflection point where the infrastructure can support basically a more robust.
Growth, yeah. So a lot of it has been sort of catch up, but in the last 5 to 10 years, the growth has been enough that now, rather the infrastructure capability has now started to reach that point exactly where growth can be considered. And there's some real cool stuff that they are thinking about in terms of logistics, because at the end of the day, it's a large country. You've got to get stuff to the ports out to export it. And
they're taking some of that market share from China in
yeah,
terms of manufacturing.
That's helping. So there are some opportunities over there. So yeah, definitely one that I'm looking at.
Cool.
Yeah.
So if you kind of turn back time a little bit, and you think back to kind of where you started, was there an aha moment and you're like, right, I'm going to make conscious decisions around building my wealth? Or was it something that you changed your mindset over time? Like, how did that look for you?
So it started from, I mean, it wasn't there in university days. I wasn't really thinking about, I should save some money. At that stage, it's always like, let's blow it all, right? And that's kind of what I did. But very quickly, as I got into the workforce, it was a case of, well, probably should try some things. Yeah. So one of the, I got really lucky. One of the first gigs that I got was working for a mining company. It was a Canadian mining company. I was hired by their office that's based in Singapore to go and work in Mongolia and China for a period of a year or so. And I was getting paid out of the Bahamas.
Oh, wow.
So it seemed a little bit clandestine.
Yes.
But,
that sounds,
but it was actually completely legit. And now that site that I was working on has been bought by BHP, and they've got a massive operation over there. But that initial engagement allowed me to put down the deposit on my first house and start the journey there. So at 23, I was lucky enough to have enough to go, okay, I've got some property. And from there, it was a case of, right, so how do you actually utilize it? How do you grow it further? And so on and so forth. When you kind of are new to investing and your viewpoint is very New Zealand specific, you go, well, property.
Yes.
Right? Everybody does it. And so even to this date, I'd say about 80% of my wealth, 80+% of my wealth would be property based.
Yep.
But it's over time, it kind of, I started looking at other options and going, you know what, property market does actually have its up and downs. And we saw that in 2008, 2009, 2010, when property absolutely fell off.
Yep.
We're definitely seeing it now.
Yeah, you're absolutely seeing it now. I feel so exposed to it myself. I feel so exposed to the high interest rates right now. But I guess you do start looking at other things, and it was seeing what happened in 2008 that got me interested in other forms of investment and, just kind of reducing that risk. Yeah.
How did you go about educating yourself before you took the jump? So you've got your first initial home. Was there an education piece? You were like, oh no, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do you learn by doing? Or is it, okay, I'm going to learn a bit about this and then I'll try it?
It was, So for me, learning is partially it was reading up, partially it was doing some research that was, on the market itself.
Yeah.
Then it was sort of talking to people who have done it before, who have gone down that path before, and I guess taking the time to actually get out there and look at what people are doing, what works in the market. So, for example, if you're looking at maximum amount of capital gain that you can get from a property, one of the things that makes sense to me is look at an area that's not fully developed yet, but that's on cards to be developed, right? As new schools are built, as new markets are built, as new amenities come into play, the value of the property around there is going to increase, right? The other way to look at it is to look at whether the specific property that you're going to buy gives you the option to add value to it in a rather established location. And that's another option that I utilized. And then obviously you go, once you kind of learn about that, you kind of go, okay, fine. What's happening with commercial property? What's happening with industrial property, and so on and so forth. So
it's a curiosity thing.
Yeah,
right?
It's a bit of. I'm lucky enough to be connected to enough people to have those conversations, to vet my investments. The options that I've got, and go, is this any good? Yeah, should I go forward with it or not? And there was a bit of that as well.
Did you proactively grow your network to be able to enhance that for you?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, of course.
That's, like you do get to know a fair number of people. Again, we talked about how small Auckland is, right? And New Zealand is. But it all comes with the effort. If you want to build any relationship, you've got to put effort into it, and that goes either way. I've known you for what, 3-4 years now?
No, probably more now.
More now?
At least 4.
Goodness.
I know.
Right?
2020.
Yeah. And, through conversations, through contacts, through people that it's so fascinating what kind of people you can meet, right?
Totally.
And eventually invest with.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that is the premise of what's that book? How to Make Friends and Influence. What is that?
Influence people.
Yeah, How to Make Friends and Influence People. I think that's pretty big one. I think that often the network is undervalued, and definitely something that I didn't typically value previously was network. As an introverted human, much more interested in research, building things, and kind of off in my own little head probably. But then, learning from my peers and Ab, and kind of like seeing the benefits of actually having people you can call when you're in need, right? That's such an amazing privilege to end up having good people that you can trust, and you can call when you need something, or you just want to bounce some ideas. And actually, the most rewarding thing is actually when you can be helpful. When someone calls you and you can go, oh, I can do this because I have that ability, whether it's help someone solve a technical problem or intro them to a person that would be of value. That becomes actually quite rewarding and and fun.
You get a lot back of what you actually put out of yourself, right? It's funny, but the universe does provide. You meet the right people at the right time, and I guess from at least from my perspective, it took a long while. Similar to what you said, I wasn't a guy who would get out there and network and so on and so forth. I was very much a case of, all right, it's be good at what you do, and things will come. But I've, over the last quite a few years seen the power of the network, seen that, it's obviously it's what you know that
But it's who you know that opens the
considered,
door.
Yeah.
but after that, it is a lot of who you know. And that goes a lot. People say that it is more in some cultures or it's more in some markets. It's there in all markets. It's there in all cultures. It's who you are comfortable with, who you have some familiarity with, who you have spoken to before, who's a less of a risk factor for you, who you can trust.
Yeah.
It's all of that, and it all comes from relationships, which is quite interesting, right? So you saw a lot of people working online during COVID and so on and so forth, and it's almost like that art of just sitting down and having a coffee and just talking about this, that, and the
Yeah.
other decreased so much among people.
Totally agree with you.
And that's why I absolutely hated it the moment the offices were open. I was like, I'm back in. I want to meet people.
Yeah.
I want to see you face to face. I want to gauge
Social
where
interaction.
you
right?
are. Yeah,
So important.
makes such a big difference.
Totally. I mean, it's definitely something we've seen because the first business I built was a remote first business in 2016, 2017, obviously well before the pandemic.
You're talking about the gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Uproar. And we took that culture into Gembot and Medition when we created the group that we would be remote first. And it kind of happened to be quite good because we ultimately incorporated the company and started working on it just before the pandemic. But there's something to be said about the idiosyncratic conversations that come from being next to each other and being in earshot, actually. It's if I'm having a conversation with my lead developer about some problem that we're facing, another developer may hear what we're discussing and be able to add input and actually provide value. And you just don't get that when you're making a Google Meet or some sort of meeting where it's two of you and there is no opportunity for someone to overhear a problem that you might be having.
What was the moment for you that made that clear and showed you the value
Of the in-person side?
Yeah.
I mean, it's that ultimately, as a founding team, we weren't really happy with the culture that we were building. You kind of don't have the same level of empathy for your team if you're not around them all the time.
Yeah.
So I think the buy-in from the individuals that work on the project may not be as high. And I think just breaking the barriers down and being focused on what you can get done, you can kind of get trapped into this idea that everything needs process and everything is going to take time, where, I've sat and done, 36 hours straight to get a product to market, that needed to be delivered. When you're online and you're remote and you've got this kind of disconnected feel from your team, that might not happen.
Yeah, that's very true.
So it's the kind of, I'd say the empathetic side of an organization, that kind of cultural togetherness, totally missing when you're online.
Yeah, very true. It's very hard to build a culture when you're online.
Yeah, so I think that is something that, and I see the value of not commuting for the sake of commuting, especially for technical people or people that are doing deep work. So I say keep your deep work at home, out of the office. But, we can get a lot done in the office, and seeing each other regularly is beneficial for everyone.
Absolutely.
So every Friday, we do the podcast now, and that takes up a large part of the day.
Yeah.
But then either side of that, we've got all sorts of team initiatives going on around design, marketing, technical. So this is our kind of Fridays are our day where we make sure that we're all in, and then throughout the week we get into the office when we can, and when it's required.
Yeah.
You don't want to go 2 months without seeing a team.
No.
No. If you're not seeing the people that you're working with, yeah, I don't see how you could manage something like that. I mean, you could. People did during COVID, so it's absolutely possible. But I wonder if that's actually had an impact on productivity,
It has,
right?
100%.
And the expectation that low productivity is okay, because at an individual level, you don't see low productivity. You just see, look, I'm just doing the work that I have to do,
Yeah.
right? But if you're if you've got like, let's say, 500,000, 10,000 people working for you, do you at that level, you would at that level probably be able to see, wow, the impact on productivity, the impact on innovation, potentially, the impact on identifying opportunities, potentially, because a lot of stuff comes out when you're having conversations, and from those conversations you find out that there are certain things that warrant effort for that'll generate improvements or generate new ways of working or allow you to catch up or identify new markets, identify new customers. How much of that is lost by not doing that?
We're social animals. That's
Yeah.
how we were made, right?
Yeah.
We originally moved in packs and that kind of thing. And I wonder too around the impact that would have had on people's mental health, which would have led to the loss of productivity. And it's
It
interesting.
becomes more individualistic.
Yeah.
So you think more about yourself because you
Yeah.
actually just don't see,
Anyone else?
hear,
Yeah.
Yeah.
feel the
So you're
people around
talking to
you.
that like lack of empathy. Well, if you don't get that social interaction, you know, you don't have this, you haven't built the same relationship with a person. So you don't feel for them as much, if that makes any sense.
Especially in the startup realm, I think in larger organizations, I think over a long period of time, you'll see the impacts compound greater, right? And then I'd say in smaller organizations, you may not get those non-linear outcomes that you could have got if you were in. I mean, that's why so many startups out of Silicon Valley are ultimately the one of the founders' apartments probably, and the team congregate there for sometimes 2-3 years, maybe more, trying to find product market fit and actually trying to build something that people want. And it's a lot easier to keep going to battle for, especially when you've got nothing, and startups often have nothing. You know, you take an enterprise like AWS, well, they have a lot of, it's a beast, right? It's a machine, big machine. Whereas if, you know, when you're starting with a startup, you don't have anything, you're going from 0 to 1.
I think I have a different view on this than you, Charlie. The impact on larger organizations, I think, doesn't compound. It is mitigated because you have so many people that you can distribute that amount, right? Where you might have one person who is, for whatever reason, isn't quite there. You have somebody else who can pick up the slack.
Yep.
You have the ability to do that. So the impact on larger organizations is lesser.
Yes.
In terms of, they might not make 120 million, they might make 100 million. So yeah, it is a 20 million impact, which in monetary terms is quite a bit. But at the end of the day, it's still making money. Whereas when you bring it to a startup, that difference between, let's say, 10,000 and 15,000 might be your solvency,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Might be the fact that you've got to make some cuts somewhere, and the fact that you haven't been able to go from 20 customers to 50 customers or 20 customers to 30 customers, whatever that means.
Yeah, for sure.
As a percentage, as an impact on the business, I would see that the impact on startups would be quite a bit bigger if people aren't
In the same place.
catching up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree. I guess distributed workforces do work in some ways, and it's a balancing act.
It also depends what part of your journey you're in, right? If you're in product development, that's fine. You can kind of go into your little hole and develop the core capability that you're looking for. Yeah, you can have sessions and
Not in
find out what
ideation
else
though,
is-
right? 'Cause
No,
you might
not in
build the wrong
ideation.
thing.
Not in design,
Yeah.
but in development, you can kind of go away and do it.
Yep.
But when it comes to go to market, absolutely not. You need to be together. You need to have your team meeting other people to try and build out your skill. And you're finding that too, right?
Well, I mean, most of the people that ultimately kind of get the aha moment with the product we've built is it's people that we've demoed it to, or someone that has been demoed to telling their friend.
True. But it's also at a startup level, it's also who you know, right? So the way that you came into the picture was through somebody you knew, said that there was somewhere that it would be worth investing in, and so on and so forth. It was all word of mouth. It was people meeting people and moving forward. That's how you build it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. In your pursuit of kind of your wealth, and you know, you're a hard working individual, I know, after knowing you for so long. Has there ever been times where the focus has just been on the career and you've had to, or you've subconsciously or consciously let things slip and paid a price?
Yeah, I'd say so. I can't specifically place a finger on it, but initially I'd say so. The way that from a career perspective at least, the way that I think about it is if you're good at what you do, the money will follow, right? Instead of kind of going for the money itself, you go for projects or engagements that are meaningful, are topical, prepare you for your next engagement, make sure that you're current, because again, with technology, the world is changing so fast. If you're not keeping current, you're going to be left behind. So it's a lot of those things that you sometimes consider. But I would say, again, COVID has been quite interesting. In the line of work that I am, COVID pushed the rates up significantly by 50% or more. And it's come down a bit since, but it's not the same as what it used to be at. That shift in the value of services has happened. So that way it's been quite okay, actually. The last few years have been excellent. I haven't had to overly think about where the money is coming from.
Okay.
It's more a case of where do you actually put that money to work.
So no journey is without its peaks and troughs, right? So have you had an instance where it just did not go to plan? And then how did you approach that to turn it around?
So I've invested in quite a few things. I've owned retail businesses. I have obviously been in technology for a long time. I've owned hotels.
Okay.
So I've gone and done different things to see if you can build wealth in different areas. And at least what I found with hospitality is it was just not my bag. Right? It requires a certain person, a certain type of person with a certain personality, able to do certain things. And that was not quite me. And I realized that only once I'd gone in, and there was significant investments on the table and so on and so forth. And it was a very careful exit, making sure that the impact of the financial impact was very closely managed, I think. How do you reduce your exposure? How do you work with different parties, competitors, sales, etc., to see what would be the best way to actually exit. And I managed to do that. And when I had gone in, one of the first things that I'd done was I had, I guess, built in a backup.
Yep.
So that if there was any impact on one side of it, the other side would take care of it, and the backup was quite stable.
Okay.
And what that meant was, even though I got out of the game, and what would have otherwise been a moderate loss turned into not being a loss at all.
Okay.
So it was something that I went in and sort of planned for,
Yeah.
essentially. Obviously, every investment that you want, that you go into, you want it to do extremely well. Right? But in the case that I had, it didn't do extremely well, but it wasn't too much of a failure as well. If I hadn't put the backup in place that I did, it would have been substantial.
What made you think about putting the backup in place? Like, was that conversations with other people?
It was
lessons learnt through other people?
It was, again, engagement with other people, but it was also advice from, financial advice from my lawyer,
Yep.
from my accountant. I mean, everyone should have figured out by this stage that, a good lawyer and a good accountant is the basis to, are two cornerstones to generating wealth.
Yep, I totally
Right.
agree. Totally underappreciated. You need a GP
Yeah.
that you can trust.
Yes.
A lawyer, some form of an accountant.
Yes.
And then you need to also have, your will sorted and make sure that you're appropriately insured.
Yeah.
And hopefully, obviously, get to a point in the future where you don't need to insure at all.
Yeah. But it is very much a case of the kind of, and this is, I guess, from a wealth perspective, right? So we had an accountant, which we had been for the longest time, and they would just do the accounts on a regular basis, and off you go. You kind of think about it, and that's okay. But that was a massive learning for me. We changed accountants to somebody who was recommended.
Yeah.
In fact, the chap is a neighbour of Fab's. He's like the next street down. And when he looked at our accounts, he went, "Do you know that I already essentially owe you 300K?
What?
We're like, "What? IRD never owes anybody any money. They don't pay you. You pay them." And they were like, "Nope. Here's what's been done. This is what the purpose of your investment looks like. You're actually owed."
Wow.
And it took a couple of years of work to get to the point, because obviously there was work that had to be done years ago, which our accountant had never done. So we had to do a full disclosure and so on and so forth. But we ended up with returns of significant returns from them. Not quite what he had called out, but still significant returns from them once you had a look. And again, that's money you didn't previously have. You can invest, you can utilize. And it was a real learning for me that if you don't have a good lawyer and you don't have a good accountant, you can A, land in a lot of trouble, or B, miss out on some pretty good opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
So wealth is a multifaceted concept. What are the other parts to your definition of wealth?
I think for me, wealth is the core purpose of wealth, right? So wealth can be looked at in many ways, but the core purpose of wealth is choices, options, opportunities. I want to go to work today. I don't want to go to work tomorrow. I don't want to work here. I want to work somewhere else. I want to spend more time with family. I want to, whatever. Those options become available to you. You unlock those options as your as you develop your wealth, you get more of an appreciation for it as you get older as well, I think. As a 20-something, you don't take it as seriously, right? But as the responsibilities on you increase as you get older, you've got your partner, you've got your kids, you've got aging parents, you've got financial responsibilities and so on and so forth that come along. And with that comes, how do you make your life easier? How do you generate those options? And wealth to me essentially means having the ability to have those options, right? To call on them. And that is, to me, the purpose of wealth. If I think about what do I want as I get older, what would I use my wealth for? I'm not going to be out there buying $10,000 watches and a new yacht or a new car every year and stuff like that. That's not, I mean, it'd be good to have the option to,
Yeah.
but doesn't mean that I'm going to exercise that option. It's very much a case of comfort. If you've got enough to go through your life comfortably, to me that's plenty. And obviously, I guess, provide some of that comfort to your kids and stuff like that too. Yeah.
So what's your take on intergenerational wealth then?
My take on intergenerational wealth is that the best wealth that you can give your kids is really education.
Yeah.
Right? And the right set of values and how to manage your wealth. There's this kind of cycle. Every third or fourth generation, people blow it.
Yeah.
Right? There's enough there in the kitty for people to go, I'm going to use it all. If I have that kind of a kid, I'd rather donate my entire wealth than give them anything, because they're just going to flit it away on stuff that's, perhaps not the most productive.
Yes.
In the worst cases, destructive.
Yeah, true.
So for me, it would be a case of spend the time with your kids, make sure that they are well educated. And education doesn't mean the ability to read and write. That's literacy, that comes. But the right set of values to be able to value what has been built, value that has been, what has been handed over, and learn how to utilize it to get the best value for your own self, whether it be to grow it, whether it be to provide you the right comforts, to provide you the right contacts,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. I think in terms of intergenerational wealth, what will be handed over the most, or is still handed over the most, still comes back to people and connections and the sort of the part of society that is connected to you that you actually hand down. And you see that with the wealthiest people as well, right? Wealth begets more wealth. Why? It does so not only through the assets you're handing down, it's through the opportunities that are provided to you. If you know the right people, you can go and intern at Goldman Sachs, right?
Yeah.
At quite a high level, and find a way to improve your knowledge, improve your understanding, improve your own connectivity, and that'll always give you options. That I think is overlooked in terms of what intergenerational wealth is. Your network is your wealth in a big way, and handing over that network or building on that network is just as important as anything else. Money's there, it comes, it goes. You don't know, I mean, even the most learned economists wouldn't know what's going to happen next over a certain period of time. But if you're giving that knowledge to your kids, and you've got 3 of them, I'm sure you're going through the process of giving that understanding to them, or as they get older, you will, to make sure that they can make something if they understand how.
Yeah, trying to help them rationalize and understand things from first principles, if you can.
Yeah.
And kind of giving information without making it overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know, so it just goes over their head. And making it fun. You know. And I think that it's something that, you know, my son has a keen eye on business and the idea of trading, not kind of day trading, but has a kind of natural interest in obtaining some stuff and then being able to sell it on. So and I think a lot of kids like them, is he really likes gems. And yeah, he has just an interest in gems, and it's interesting because it's not been taught, it's not been encouraged, but he just has this interest in.
You come from that background a little bit
I
too,
do,
don't you?
yes.
funny.
I mean, I did try.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had kind of 10 years as a goldsmith.
Yeah.
So yes, but I left goldsmithing really when he was a baby. So he's never seen me in that space, right? He's always seen me as a tech entrepreneur. But I've also explained how how short selling works, and through the conversation, he decided that we should short sell Rolexes because in the future we'll have different materials that humans will find more valuable. So the gold Rolex will be worthless. And I just thought that was interesting that we kind of came to that conversation, came to the end of the conversation. He's like, we should be short selling Rolexes. And I was like, interesting, you know, because like he had kind of decided what it all meant in his own head and kind of worked out what it meant. And I also he really is into Roblox.
Yeah.
So I went onto the platform and I got Roblox up and I started taking him through the balance sheet. Started off because he was playing Roblox. And then I went, do you know how much Roblox is worth? And then I explained it to him and I explained how much income they were generating and how much they were worth. And then he goes, I would never pay that much for Roblox. It's not worth that much. So it's kind of cool. I think it's fun to try.
How much are Roblox? Just not a curious.
I mean, it was like basically, I think it was 15 to 35 billion at the time. And they don't make much. Well, they lose money. Actually, they're burning a lot of capital.
Okay.
I don't have it on the top of my head, but yeah, it was interesting. I was like, yeah, and I can't remember the exact numbers. Don't quote me, but let's say it was 15 billion at the time, or maybe it's 45. I can't remember, between that range. And I was like, and he was like, wow. And then I was like, but they're losing 2 billion a year, or whatever it was. And he was like, what do you mean? You know, and then it kind of, there's this whole kind of conversation going on, and then he came to the conclusion that he didn't like Roblox as an investment.
Yeah, it doesn't sound that great.
But he still plays.
Yeah, of course.
And obviously the interesting part of an investment like Roblox is obviously it's got huge penetration into his age bracket. So what does that mean for the potential future cash flows of the business? But yeah, it's great to try and impart little things for your kids and try and do that. I think
that's a good story.
It often comes from, I'd say, struggle. Trying to provide environments where the kids actually do struggle a little bit. Like taking the kids climbing or something can be quite helpful.
Yeah.
Or like having the kids put themselves out there. I know that your kids do gymnastics, so do mine, and my son does soccer now.
Yeah.
And organised sports is a great way to give some struggle.
Yeah.
I think that's like something that I didn't have available to me when I was growing up was those sort of traditional things. Yeah. But I see now that providing that to your kids is like a small demonstration of what the real world is like.
Do you kind of tell them what you went through as well?
No, I would never
No?
burden them with
Yeah, so you don't
my
tell them that
story.
you had to walk to school 10 miles uphill, both ways?
I don't. I try to shield them from my stories, but one day
One day.
when they can, because it's all about timing, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
give someone a bit of context or information at the wrong time, and like you said, the universe finds a way of providing the right information at the right time.
At the right time.
And
It
yes,
comes along, yeah?
some information's not required at certain times.
Indeed. Indeed.
So, last question.
Yeah.
If you had to give, say, 2 bits of advice to someone who wanted to start off kind of moving towards their wealth, building their wealth, what would your advice be?
First would be start now.
Yep.
Not later on, now. Yeah, the market is down. It's a great time to do your research, right? The market is down. It's a great time to buy.
Sometimes.
So it's do it as soon as possible. And second would be, and I'm thinking about this in terms of what I would have done myself,
Yep.
right? I would have gotten into it way sooner,
Yep.
is what I would have liked to do. And the second thing is talk to as many people as you can, seek advice. You know something, your immediate family knows something, and that might be very similar to what you know. But the more people you talk to, the more you'll learn, the more you'll understand. You'll open yourself up to things you didn't know existed.
Yep.
So talk to people as much as possible about what it is you want to achieve, and take that information, and slowly the answers will become clear in terms of how to approach your own journey, I think.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, good fun.
Totally. Thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you.